Oh, let me just make sure my phone is...
That's wonderful. I haven't even got my gavel and the room came to order. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a really special opportunity this evening. We're here primarily to celebrate the gift of an important archive to Somerville College, but we're also going to reflect about women's leadership around the world. And obviously it's fitting that we're doing this in the week that marks the centenary of Margaret Thatcher's birth. One of our alumna, not just the UK's first woman Prime Minister, but also the first scientist to hold that position, which is quite extraordinary. We have people here who are members of the college who have Margaret Thatcher scholarships, so particularly warm welcome to you. We're here thanks to Laura Liswood. Laura is a former Goldman Sachs managing director. She's a trailblazing lawyer and the author of The Loudest Duck, which is a business guide about optimising diversity in the workplace. And Laura's renowned for her unwavering dedication to gender equity and inclusive leadership. She co-founded the Council of Women World Leaders in the 90s and serves today as its Secretary General. She spent decades bringing together presidents and prime ministers to elevate women's voices on the global stage, and it's the records of those meetings and interviews that form the basis of the archive that we will be privileged to house here in the college. But I'm also honoured to be joined on stage by the Right Honourable Kim Campbell, who was Canada's first and so far only female Prime Minister. She was also the first woman to hold the Justice and Defence portfolios and the first woman to be a Defence Minister of a NATO country. And obviously, having come from NATO, I see the North Atlantic Council. I've been looked at it for the last 10 years in close-up. And to be honest, it's still rather male-dominated, but it's becoming more inclusive of women. So Kim has blazed trails. I can't tell you too much more about her because that would be the end of our time. She, as you can imagine, with that career, she has done everything. And she's also one of the interviewees that's in the archive, as is Margaret Thatcher. So what I wanted to do to make the most of hearing our guests talk rather than me is I thought the first thing I would do was ask Laura to tell us a little bit about the archive and the council, and then widen the discussion to both of our guests to talk about their views on women and leadership. So I suspect, Laura, that many Somervillians, especially those of us of a certain vintage, we understand why you saw the need to capture the experience of women leaders. Can you tell us how you see the evolution of that over the years you've been working on it, and also the impact of women's leadership in as that time has gone on?
Thank you. And first, thank you and congratulations on your position.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I guess it's you have to be a Catherine. Is that it? And perhaps Royal. Thank you. And of course, I must thank my great friend and Prime Minister Kim Campbell, she was one of the founding chairs of the council, along with President Vigdis of Iceland and President Robinson of Ireland. So Kim has been there every step of the way and been a great resource. And also, one of the reasons that I've done this is to increase the visibility of women leaders. The Prime Minister has a story that she can tell about asking Bill Clinton about, and she'll probably tell that story in a minute, about who was known. And really the only person who seemingly was known was Margaret Thatcher. And yet when I was, I had one of these in the shower questions, right? They should generally stay in the shower. These questions. But this was, what would it be like if we had a woman president in the United States? That was my question. But of course there was not anyone when I was doing this, and there is still not anyone in the United States to ask that question to, right? But there were 15 women living at the time when I did this who were then or had been president or prime minister of their country. So I just thought, well, I have no idea why I thought I could meet a president or a prime minister. Not from CNN, not a great interviewer, never asked anyone what kind of a tree there would be if they were a tree, that kind of thing. But I did go about asking for these interviews. And I will say, ultimately, no one turned me down for the interviews. Margaret Thatcher said, come back after I've met all the other 14. Which is basically her way of getting rid of me, right? That was not possible, but true to her word. After I met all the other 14, I got my interview with Margaret Thatcher. And I was supposed to be with her for a half an hour. I was with her about 3 hours. So some of the taping that I have given to the school are these 3 hours of taping of the interview. Took me about an hour to get through the Falklands, but that was part of what she was wanting to talk about.
It was a big deal.
So I think primarily in this, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the Prime Minister, Kim Campbell, in that she says you want to normalize the notion of women as leaders. So no one has to stop and say, is it possible? What would it be like? And that you could just, when you went to vote or something, it wasn't like, oh, I'm voting for a woman. No, I'm voting for a leader who has certain traits of what I want from a leader and positions of what I want. And the woman part of it disappears. Yeah. We're not there yet. Yeah, no. By any stretch of the imagination. Every one of the world leaders then and now in the council has, if you're freely elected, a woman head of state or head of government, and I sure hope someone here at Somerville will do that, you are invited to join the council. We will wait 3 months to make sure you stick.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so we have 2 of your 3 prime ministers. We have one of your prime ministers as a member, Theresa May. Yes. Right. The other one didn't quite make it. There's 96 members now of this council. And once you're in, you're in. And you don't leave once you become a former. And, and there are several others, and Kim might talk about some of the other entities, but to have that kind of collective voice, to have that kind of ability to see women in these positions, and see the diversity of the women, and the diversity of their political positions. They're not all liberal, they're not all conservative, whatever. I think it's very important for people. I think it's particularly very important for young people to see that. So I'll stop there for now, but that's kind of the impetus of this.
Thank you very much. I think that's fascinating, and a bit of good news for you, which is that as the head of a house in Oxford University, we have almost reached 50-50 for the first time. So we are actually discussing whether, as heads of house, there will be a sort of women's group or not. We feel in a way we don't need it anymore, which is, I think, a huge mark of success. So I completely share that. I think, to both of you, we'll go to Kim, there's a lot of talk about strong men at the moment. They're everywhere. But there are also some women in really key posts. You think of Ursula von der Leyen, you think of Kaja Kallas, both in the EU, and really not being commented anymore that they are women, which I think is very much as Laura was saying. Do you think that current women leaders are facing the same challenges as you? Tell us a little bit about those challenges and how you think that's changed for the women of today.
Well, I think Laura would agree with me that it's a more complicated question than you might think, because today the environment in which leaders of both sexes are operating is very different because of social media. Yeah. And the way that social media can be used to intensify stereotyping, prejudice, negativity, etc. So if you have a problem, I think today's communication technology and environment can actually make it harder. I think what's really, really important about the work that Laura has done, and I'm so pleased and delighted to be here to share this event, that she is giving her archive to Somerville College so that others can pore over the work that she did, because it was groundbreaking and no one else had ever done that. But what is so important is, as I say, to make the notion of women leaders ordinary, unremarkable. And when I see Ursula von der Leyen, who is, before I became Prime Minister, I remember once reading an article about, what you'd have to be a woman president of the United States, and it said, well, you can't be blonde. It had all of these things that you couldn't be. But I look at many of these women, Commissioner Callis, and he said, well, first of all, they're very attractive, they're very feminine. Margaret Thatcher walked a very careful line. She was a very attractive woman.
Yes.
And when I was Prime Minister, I never wore pants.
Really?
I mean, long pants. That was for I only, if I went to a sporting event, I was always in a skirt and pantyhose.
Wow.
And now that's changed very much. But I look at somebody like Margaret Thatcher, who had a lot of very good advice about how she dressed. She was very careful. She was very, very feminine, but not too feminine. Not feminine in a way that might lead people to think that she was not strong. And that was a challenge that she faced because nobody had done that before. When I became Prime Minister, nobody who looked or sounded like me had ever done that job before, and it was a bit of a shock to people who were used to the old system, like the Ottawa Press Gallery. So I don't want to go on too long, but I would simply say that having more on the horizon, on the landscape, can change people's expectations. I always say that the landscape from which you figure out how the world works can really determine your implicit attitudes, whether you find it natural that a woman would be in a leadership position, should be a scientist, whatever. But I think also the mechanics of politics and leadership today are very different, and that they intensify some of the other problems that not just women, but any marginalized or heretofore unrepresented group at the top faces in order to be credible and accepted, and therefore able to succeed.
Laura, the same question to you. With your conversations that have gone from 15 to 96, how do you think it's changed?
Well, there's sort of the good news and the not so good news.
Yeah.
The good news is that there are more women who are sitting heads of state, who are ministers. You've got, cabinets that are 50-50, women and men, which, is something else. You've got parliaments that have critical mass of women, etc. So you can see the numbers have grown. It sort of reminds me of, I had actually met with John Major at one point, you recognize, and he's reputed to have talked to Boris Yeltsin, and had said to Yeltsin, well, tell me in one word how it's going in Russia. And Yeltsin responds, good. And he says, well, maybe you better elaborate, Boris. Tell me in 2 words how it's going. And Yeltsin responds, not good. So, when we talk about this, absolutely. I'm in the good, not good category of this. The not good part of it is the original grouping that I talked to, and I talked to the first woman prime minister in the world, Sarima Bandaranaike of Sri Lanka. They all said they were over-scrutinized.
Yeah.
The tolerance for their mistakes was less than the tolerance for mistakes for men.
Yeah.
A lot of scrutiny on their dress, their hairstyle, all of that kind of thing. If you show my documentary, you'll hear some of that kind of stuff from them. They were often, as Kim was referencing, you got to be strong, but you also got to be feminine. And you can be assertive, but boy, don't be aggressive. It's just like you're in this double bind kind of thing. So you're walking down this very narrow path of how you can behave. So that was then. Okay, talk to the women today. Over scrutiny by the press, less tolerance for mistakes. Their hair, their styles, blah, 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 blah. You still see all of that. I mean, who had the kitten slippers?
Theresa May.
Thank you very much, Theresa May.
Wonderful shoes.
Wonderful shoes. Okay, well, relevant, not relevant.
No, completely irrelevant.
Kind of thing. So, and then later on, what Kim was saying, and the Interparliamentary Union indicates that this digital harassment stuff that's going on, that women politicians are, it's not that men won't get it, but women politicians are 9 times more likely to be digitally harassed than the men politicians. So that's having an enormous chilling effect on women stepping into the positions or taking second term, for example. You've seen some examples of women saying, I've had enough, this is threatening to my family, et cetera, et cetera. And that, so that progress slope, I worry it's going to plateau a bit because of this technology. You know, I mean, E.O. Wilson is quoted having said, we have primitive people today, we have primitive emotions, medieval institutions, right, and godlike technology.
Yeah.
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 And try to combine all those three things. So, you know, the good and the not good.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that very much mirrors what I've seen. I sort of thought that by the time the generation below me, some of the people sitting in front of us were taking up jobs, I thought they would have, you know, less of a challenge. But sadly, I agree with you. I think, unfortunately, it's very similar now to what it was before. Would you advise a young woman to go into politics, Kim?
Well, I absolutely would advise a young woman to go into politics because I think it really matters. First of all, I loved being a politician. I think I might be a little ADHD or something because what I liked about politics was the variety of it. I am an academic. I was a Soviet specialist. I taught political science at university, and then I became a lawyer. But what I loved about politics was the mix of having to master important issues and being in a legislative body is like going to a really good college because you can learn anything you want to learn because you must learn. And there are resources around to help you learn the things that you need to know. The opportunity to interact with the public, which is extremely important to be effective, but it's a way of helping you understand that, you know, it's not an abstract exercise. Real flesh and blood people are affected by what you're doing. And if you like people and you're curious about them and you want to learn, you can. The opportunity to be a teacher, the opportunity to try and create a public that understands what the choices are and informing them. I mean, there's just a lot of different things that you do. Some of that are contemplative and thoughtful, others that are much more outgoing and gregarious. But at the end of the day, it really matters because, as Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried. And we're seeing now a great onslaught on democracy. And I'm a Canadian, and I can tell you, standing there hanging over the 49th parallel and looking south is a pretty scary prospect. But the two things I want to say, I'm of the generation, both my parents were in uniform in World War II. So when I'm in Italy, where I live now, and I go to see a Canadian war cemetery or a Commonwealth war cemetery, and I see all those young, and most of the boys in these cemeteries, I have a deep sense of obligation to what they did to defeat fascism in Europe. And so much of what I've been able to enjoy, and even my opportunities to become a politician and do things, I owe to them. But that's a long time ago. I'm getting to be an old geezer. And for a lot of people, the memory of what it was to live in a non-democratic society, people don't really know. And that really frightens me. Similarly, we have a lot of challenges and economic challenges, and I do not support the growing inequality, economic inequality, which I think has created these oligarchs who have wealth that it's really, I think, immoral for one person to have. No one should be able to have that kind of an influence on how we communicate and how things are done. And this is going to be a challenge for us dealing with it. And as I see what's happening in the United States, it really worries me. But the point I want to make is that what this has led to is in many ways a backlash against many of the social changes that people of my generation consider great victories. I was Minister of Justice in Canada, the first woman Minister of Justice, and I convened a national symposium on women law and the administration of justice. I rewrote our sexual assault laws. There are many ways in which these things have changed the policy. But you have in the United States now a group of people who are in the government now who want to rescind the 19th Amendment of the American Constitution, which was the amendment that gave women the vote. Now you stop and think about that. You think, oh, this Kim Campbell came and she was just full of it. She was just totally exaggerating. No, I am not exaggerating. So whenever we make gains, we make it possible for people who are unhappy with their situation in life to identify us as the problem.
Yes.
And yet, every sensible bit of research that I'm sure many of you are accessing as students here shows that the advancement of women is one of the most important indicators of the social development of a country. And that the best thing that can happen for men is for women to be equal and to have these opportunities, because it does work so much better for men. They're more prosperous, they have more opportunities, and to be all the things that men can be. So we are facing what I never, if you'd asked me 5 years ago when I used to go and talk about women, I would talk about all the changes we've made in policy. I am now actually quite frightened. And as Margaret Atwood, who wrote Handmaid's Tale, said, nothing that I wrote in Handmaid's Tale was made up. Everything I wrote about has actually happened. And some of these things are happening now. So the cost of liberty is eternal vigilance. But the answer is not for women not to go into politics. It's for them to go in politics and to be part of the solution.
Well, that was a wonderful rallying call. Thank you very much. It was really, really important to hear that. Can I ask you, Laura, why the US has not been able to bring itself to have a female president?
Yes, the eternal question that we get. I'll do a little bit of a civics lesson and then maybe move into the culture. But I also want to echo what Kim said. Sometimes women have a tendency to think that power means power over someone, and then therefore they eschew it. They don't want it. But power to do things. I remember we were talking to a group of young African women, and asking them, did they want to be like the chiefs of their village? And the answer was no, they did not. And so then we reframed the question and said, well, do you want clean water for your families? Do you want education for your children? Do you want health care available for everyone? Oh, yes, of course, we want that. Then to explain that, okay, you couldn't do that if you had that kind of power. So understanding, as Kim was saying, understanding why it's so important for both men and women to have equal voices in any platform, but particularly political, because that's where much of the power resides. So I just want to add a footnote to that. Kim's always eloquent. Yeah, that's why she was prime minister. You get that.
Yeah.
So, United States. Okay. First and foremost, we have what's known as the first past the post system, 50+1.
Yeah.
Okay. You get this. You have more of a proportional representations kind of system. Sort of.
It's different because
it's different.
It's not electing the leader directly.
Right. It's not a direct
First
election.
past the post, but not.
But not
not quite.
Not direct election
Right.
of the leader.
Yeah.
Yes, and others are, you get into coalitions, and therefore you're historically. So first past the post is historically very unfriendly to historically out of power groups. To get that kind of level. This is lessening now, but, it's actually greater now. I was going to say that it takes a great deal of money to run for the presidency.
Yes.
Right? Now, once a woman gets into the general election, she can raise as much money as a man can. But it's the primaries that she often has trouble raising the amount of money. And we're talking, $1 billion for a presidential.
Wow.
We would prefer yours 1 month of campaigning. That's it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. People are already campaigning.
Already, yes, absolutely.
We generally get our presidents historically, of late, not so much, from the vice presidents, the governors,
Yes.
the executive governor positions, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Okay, the military.
Yeah.
So, how many women vice presidents have we had? Yeah. Okay. How many governors? Very few. Some, but very few. One of them who was terrific, was Canadian. So that keeps her out. So very few. So that pool is very small.
Yes.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs have to have military combat experience.
Yeah.
It's only been very recently that women were allowed into military combat. So now you begin to see what happens with these pipelines.
Yes.
So there's a very, getting them from the Senate, getting them from business, very few. Some successful, some not so successful. But generally, this is where our pool comes from. So it's a very small, and then you have to just be a megalomaniac to want to run for the presidency, kind of thing. So there's that. Culturally, if we just polled you and said, would you vote for a woman president? If you're American, you'd go, oh yeah, I'd vote for a woman president. Sure, no problem. Do you think your neighbor would vote for a woman president? Oh no, that idiot, he would never vote for a woman president. That's the true answer.
Right.
for that person.
Got you.
I'm not pointing to you, because you would vote for a woman president. So the polling just, and we saw that, the polling can be way off
Way out.
when it comes to a woman. And culturally, there's still about, hard to know exact number, 2, 3, maybe growing percentage of people who say absolutely a woman does not belong in the presidency. And given how close our elections are,
Yes,
that
matters.
that matters.
Yeah.
It's more like, like one of the reasons the Nordic countries are so nirvana when it comes to gender equality and the number of women heads of state and government is that, go back to the 11th century when it was a fishing culture. And the men went out to fish for 11 months of the year. And the women ran everything.
Ran the show.
They ran the show.
Yeah.
Economically, politically, at home, etc. So very different cultural norms. And we got that kind of Wild West, John Wayne, right off into the sunset alone kind of culture. So
That's a really interesting point.
those are all the answers to that.
I want to just disagree with you in a very modest way, although I'd love you to tell your story about where she was working with a very high-powered financial company and was discussing these things, all these men, and what she discovered is what she calls the positive illusion, that if you say to a woman, you could be president, she says, oh no, I couldn't, she has 8 reasons why she can't. You say to a man, well, you could be president, he says, oh yeah, I probably could, a bit busy this week.
That's very true.
Positive illusion,
Yeah, right.
which is part of it. But I want to remind you, in 2016, 3 million more Americans
good
voted
vote
for
for a
Hillary
woman.
Clinton
Yes.
Yeah, good
than
point.
voted for Donald Trump.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the Electoral College that made the problem, plus very serious voter suppression. The Russians did interfere in the election. In fact, the Senate
Good
Intelligence
point.
Committee even issued a report, they heard about it. I am not convinced that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. I think there is evidence coming out now about the vote distributions in the swing states that raise serious questions about interference, how it is possible that so many ballots had Democrats all the way up to the top, including Senate, but Trump is president. It's not possible, and there are people pushing to try and get at least some counties or some precincts to count their paper ballots because it just doesn't make sense. And Elon Musk has said that he won the presidency for Donald Trump. Without him, the Democrats would have taken the House. Kamala Harris would be president, and the Senate would be 51-49. How did he do it? We don't know. But well, there's now people coming to understand how voting counting machines could have been programmed to do those kinds of switches and just carefully to avoid the automatic recount level. So I am not persuaded that she did not win. I may be wrong, but in 2016, 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton than for Donald Trump. And there are many women governors in the United States, and they're strong, and more coming. So I'm not, and in fact, what the United States shows, I mean, Laura is absolutely right that the key is primaries, because the most rabid partisans are the people who get involved in primaries. But in the United States, if a woman gets nominated, she has as good or better a chance of being elected as a man. So that's where the bottlenecks are. So, I think it's more complicated. But I think Laura's absolutely right that the American presidency is in some ways a unique role, where if you are the commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful military, people want to know, what you know. But what is amazing is that there are a lot of women who are remarkably knowledgeable and have been held defense portfolios and have shown that they can do this. So I think it's hard, but I think Laura is absolutely right that there still are cultural barriers. But I'm not so discouraged in the sense that I think that a growing number of people are very eager to support women, but they need to be able to get into the position where they're on the ballot.
Thank you. Can I ask one last question, because I know there'll be lots of good
I
questions.
can just add to that.
Oh, sorry.
Kim is
You go,
absolutely
you go.
right. I mean, she's absolutely right that Hillary didn't win. And that electoral college just screws everything up in our country. But it will be almost impossible to get rid of it. You do also need at least 3 women running in the primary.
Okay.
Because you have to have so that the press stops over scrutinizing the one. Because if there's only one, it's like, oh, what do all women think?
Yeah.
You know, it's just
ridiculous,
ridiculous kind of thing. So you have to have enough women. So that's why, yes, there are some really good women governors, for example, who potentially could be running for the office. So, you know, again, I'll go back, it's good and not good. You know, in terms of where, particularly, don't forget, it's Howard Gardner's discussion about leading minds. We have a story that we either buy into or a counter story that we buy into, as with whatever the politicians are telling us. Well, now we've got a person in the office who's creating a story.
Yes.
So what's the counter story going to be to him in that, you know, in this situation? And that'll make a big difference on what people are looking for in traits of a leader and what they have stereotypical notions of how women lead and how men lead.
Yeah.
You know, you get the command and control notion and the consensus notion, which, you know, to quote Kim, she said, women don't hold the candle on truth, beauty, and light. Yeah. They don't, you know. I've seen some pretty awful women leaders. I've seen some pretty awful men leaders too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, in fact, you rather preempted my question, because I was going to ask you whether in your work and your experience, whether you do think there is a difference between how women govern and how men govern. And I mean, I think a lot of people in this country, because I'm old enough to remember Margaret Thatcher becoming Prime Minister, and a lot of people were quite surprised by, you know, sort of how tough she was. And how forthright she was and how clear she was, and that wasn't what they expected necessarily from a female leader. But do you think there is a difference in how men and women approach governing, or is that just too broad?
Well, I think there may be some things you can identify, but they often reflect the nature of social expectations in a particular country. Yes. What is the scope that you're allowed to occupy? And you know what's interesting, in some countries, one of the things that diffuses those expectations can actually be status. Women who are the daughters of, you know, of prominent male leaders may kind of get a pass. They may be assumed to have qualities of leadership, and there's a lot of kind of nepotism or expectations that the child will be like the father. So there are circumstances that can change that. There are also, I mean, there's a lot of interesting research on how women approach things. Are they more interactive or more command and control? And again, it depends on what you can get away with. My experience as both a minister and then as Prime Minister, which kind of changed things, my power relationship, was that all of it was contextual. You know, there were times when it was very important to be highly consultative and interactive. There are other times when I had to make a decision and I had to be, you know, very strong and very direct about it. So I think as we get more supportive of women as leaders, we become also more accepting of the variety of ways in which people express leadership, because men do it differently. You know, we expect men to be strong, but we also like it when they are kind and care about people. I mean, the current incumbent of the White House may be a great exception. But what I mean is that men can be many things, and I think one of the worst things about gender stereotyping is the gender stereotyping of men as well. Yeah. Because I know also, my life is full of wonderful men, and they have a whole variety of approaches. But I think a lot of it depends on what women feel they can be. Yes. And the support they get in being strong. And as Laura has said, you know, not every woman who leads is a good leader, is a success, any more than every man is. And some may, and I think of some of the lunatics that are in the American Congress right now. Many of them are women.
Yes, and male and female lunatics.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's social expectations. Yes. Yeah, the challenge often, however, is that which we say is okay for a man to be, i.e. assertive, as an example, people will interpret in a woman as being aggressive. You know, I often joke, you know, assertive men bomb small countries. You know, assertive women put you on hold on the telephone. You know? So, you know, it's a very different standard by which, you know, so you can say, yes, a woman can have this style, yes, a woman can have this style, a man can have this style, but the bandwidth of which they can operate actually
Absolutely,
is
it's very different.
And you'll see that also with other historically
Yes.
underrepresented groups.
Yes.
People often wonder, why is Barack Obama so calm?
Yes.
Because the bandwidth for a black man to fall into angry black man is very narrow.
Yes. Very good point.
So, I get it that
Yeah.
we should, and in truth, the best leaders are the ones who have the most tools in their toolbox,
Yeah.
right? So there are time for consensus
Yes.
leadership,
But,
interactive,
yeah.
engaged leadership. And, it's like, okay, if you're in a meeting, let's hear what you have to say, let's hear what you have to say, all good. If the building is burning, you don't want to say, well, let's talk about door A. Or maybe we should consider door B. Or can you talk to me about door C
Yeah.
as a plan?
Yeah.
No, you want the leader to say door A now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
that's, the best leaders will have both sets of skills. But women, almost intuitively have an understanding of the bands, particularly women in politics. They'll know how far they can go before they tip into certain levels of, of social blowback.
Yeah.
Is what that is.
Yeah.
Good expression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I've recognised that from my own career very, very clearly, what I was allowed to get away with, if you like, and what my male colleagues were allowed to get away with was actually very different. And I was once asked by one of the someone I'd characterised as a bit of an old dinosaur, a very senior ambassador, when I was an ambassador, and he said, well, there's women in the room, Catherine, don't you think it's gone far enough now? You're just never going to be satisfied. You're not going to say this is equality. And I said to him, well, for me, equality is when mediocre women do as well as mediocre men. Thank you. I don't think we ever spoke again, funnily enough. Anyway, now I think it's time to hear from our audience. A hand shot up at the back there. There's microphones going around. Could you just introduce yourself and before you ask your question?
Thank you so much. My name is Ashma Gulati and I'm from India. I'm doing my MSc in Sustainability and Environment from the School of Geography. I'm also an Indira Gandhi scholar who was the first Prime Minister in India under the OICSD department here. My question is probably to just get some insights for you in terms of the systematic blockages that we have, which really do not make it a very conducive environment for women from a local municipality level to even as a prime minister or president in certain places to participate or to even think about to participate in certain elections. And then how those systematic blockages are really used as creating a perception against women, saying that they need more protections, they need more support to be running in the first place. And if I can just give you some example, for example, in India, political parties and working in elections is not considered as a workplace. So you do not have any benefits, but also any protection against sexual harassment, per se. We have an act for prevention of sexual harassment. Political parties are not considered to be a part of it. For example, even for maternity benefits, again, political parties are not provided within that compass altogether. And then there are so many protections in terms of against violence. I remember last year there was this report commissioned by the UK Election Commission with the Blavatnik School of Government in terms of to understand how do you protect women who are participating in UK against the violence, especially with respect to deepfake, but also a lot of abusive violence that is used by their counterparts in political parties. And then again, I've seen in India that these special, I wouldn't say special, but these protections that would make it very, I would say leverage the women or make it possible for them to be a part of the system are really created as like, now we have to give them this. Oh, but now they're demanding this. Isn't it better for a male counterpart that we don't need these special protections, we can still come and continue to serve the larger good of the society, hence we are better. And I feel like that has been a problem, especially in India and other global south countries. So I just wanted to hear your insights of how do you balance in terms of creating an environment which is conducive for women to be women in the first place, but also then also leave the gender as a, I would say, as sidelines or in undertones of their work that they do. Thank you.
What do you think, ladies?
You want to go ahead?
No. Well, it is a time-honored question in the sense of how do you want to make, do you have to have things that create additional protections because society is creating the situations that require additional protections, versus just saying, okay, everyone's going to be treated the same. Yeah, if I understand your point on this. The challenge is, it's like some people have very strong opinions about affirmative mechanisms, gender quotas and things like that. Those aren't to advantage, that's to level the playing field. Yeah, and that's part of the challenge of these kinds of things. How do you make sure you have a level playing field with anyone? I don't want anyone to be advantaged by any means. But if we've got situations and cultural norms and laws, and most countries yet, almost no country has 100% gender laws that are, or laws that are gender neutral. Not countries just don't have that yet. And a lot of the World Bank, for example, is working on that kind of thing. So it is a time-honored tension, yeah. But I think at this point, sometimes you need some things that will ensure a level playing field, you know. So that you're not already operating at a deficit, you know, to try to get to the same place. You know, there's a lot of images that can come with that kind of thing. You know, are you, 10 yards before the finish line? Are you 100 yards before the finish line? You know, that kind of image. So, you know, it's an argument and a discussion. Yeah, but that should not stop women from trying to get into it, nor should it stop men from supporting women being into it. There's a great, you know, I happen to believe a lot in critical mass for women. Great phrase. Women are like snowflakes. One alone may melt, but together we can stop traffic. So that's what you need.
Would you like to add to that, Kim? Or?
Well, if I could just say that the reason why we need women in these positions is, first of all, to have the substantive value of their understanding of the reality of life as women live it, in order to be able to make good public policy, both to ensure that legislative bodies do not unintentionally do things that disadvantage women and families and the role that women play, but also to see, you know, the opportunities of that. The other reason is that to have the value of the skills and intellect that women bring. But if you think that women don't bring anything, then you're untroubled by their underrepresentation, and you're bothered by efforts to increase their representation. And it is that understanding of the reality of who women are and what they can be, and thank goodness we're all here at Somerville College, where we're a little more enlightened. But Laura made a brief reference. One of the studies that you know, we both looked at in the work that we've done on gender was done by Claudia Golden, who actually won the Nobel in economics a few years ago. And when she researched to look at the way symphony orchestras auditioned for new musicians. And in the paper that she wrote, she also includes wonderful discussions of her interviews with conductors. But what she found is that when symphony orchestras audition behind a screen, where those who are evaluating the applicants for positions cannot see who is playing, when there is a carpet, they cannot hear the footsteps, they have no idea who is playing, they give almost 50% more positions to women. And then when she interviewed the conductors would say things like, "Oh no, we aren't biased against women, but you know, women tend to have small technique." Well, if you think a woman's going to have small technique, that's what you'll hear.
Yeah.
And one of the wonderful things about being in this college, and you've got this, you know, college of the social sciences right next door, you can learn all of the amazing discoveries in social and cognitive psychology that tell us that the way we think isn't how we think, that we all have implicit attitudes, there are barriers to making good decisions, and many of those play out in mechanisms to discriminate against people, whether it's gender or race or any other quality, that make us believe that a certain person is not a good candidate for a position. And that's why DEI is not to give people who don't deserve it a leg up. It's to give the people who do deserve it a chance to be seen and heard for who they are. So the efforts to get women into these positions and the efforts to provide protections to make it possible for them to participate are really based on this underlying understanding that the value of your democratic output depends upon having a political process that gives voice to a great many different people. And I just conclude by saying that the Canadian Prime Minister, the previous one, Justin Trudeau, was the first Canadian Prime Minister to appoint a cabinet that was explicitly and deliberately 50% women.
Yes.
And after he did that, he was asked why he did. He said, "Well, because it's 2015." I mean, that was his answer. But he went off to an international meeting, and a prime minister of another country said to him, "Why did you make a cabinet that was 50% women? Why didn't you just appoint on merit?" And he said, "If I'd appointed on merit, I'd have had more women."
Good. I think we'll go for the front row because you were picked on.
Yeah.
So
Which I love to do.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I am from the United States.
oh,
And I did vote for having a woman president. Anyway, so my question is, why has Canada not had another, woman prime minister?
short and sweet.
It's harder than it looks. You have to become the leader of a party that can form a government. We have had other women party leaders, but not of parties that could form a government. We've had about 15 changes of leadership.
Yeah.
And all I can say is it's an old boys network. That the power structures in the parties, it's sort of the equivalent to the primary system that women face in the United States. If you look at the history of how Hillary Clinton got to be the nominee, or Kamala Harris, there were factors there that were not easy for others to replicate, but they could happen. But in Canada, it's very competitive, and there are a lot of men who want to do it. I think we have had women who run the last leadership campaign for the party that's now in government. Chrystia Freeland, who had been the Minister of Finance, came second, but she only got 8% of the vote. But I think that was because Canadians felt that Mark Carney had a particular and unique set of qualities that they thought would better position him to deal with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump did not like Chrystia Freeland, because she bettered him in the original renegotiation of the NAFTA. And
He hadn't forgotten.
he hadn't forgotten. So I would say that I think it's all the standard reasons, and that when you get at that top level, the competition is very tough and the elbows are very sharp.
Yeah. I'll also say, not for Canada particularly, because it doesn't apply, but many countries have both a president and a prime minister, right? One being more ceremonial, one being more executive. You will often find the woman getting into the ceremonial position more easily.
Ireland would be a good example of that.
Ireland's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
But there are a number of countries that are like that. And then, at least with my research, with the ones I interviewed, and even to this day, about a third of the women were widowed or daughters of the leader, a legacy. They were very legacy leaders. So in countries like Pakistan, you'd say, how is it possible to have a woman leader?
Yes.
Because she's a legacy. So you still see that going on too. So you've got all these factors, as Kim was relating, that make it easier or not so easy.
It's my honor to be here. Let me introduce myself a little bit. I grew up in China, and then I immigrated to US at my 30s, and I got my master degree in US. I feel something else is much more important than gender. If I can vote in UK, I will vote for Margaret Thatcher, definitely. But for the US elections, actually I didn't vote for Harris, I didn't vote for Hillary, I voted for Trump. I think gender is not the only issue. Sometimes something else, your political ideas are much more important than gender.
Yeah.
Always.
I don't think anyone
no
would
one's
disagree
arguing
with that.
that.
Yeah.
You won't get any dissent from that I think,
No, I
speaking
agree.
for everyone here,
Absolutely.
no, it's never.
My name's Carol Thatcher, and I think I know a little bit about female leadership, courtesy of my mum, who spent 11 and a half years in number 10 last century as the Iron Lady. I've got a question for our North Americans. Do they think that Condoleezza Rice was possibly the best first female president America never had? Part 2 of the same question, it's a bit different, but it's current this week, is, had Kamala Harris been elected, would she have got the hostages out of Gaza this week? Or do you think it took the bombastic self-confidence of Donald Trump?
Two good questions.
Well, let me address that a bit from my own perspective. I think she could well have, but I think the agreement to get the peace in Gaza was the agreement, exactly the agreement that Joe Biden developed. And when Benjamin Netanyahu went to meet Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, they decided that it was not in either of their interests to end the war. I think if Kamala Harris had won, Netanyahu would have had to do a different calculus. I don't think it had anything to do with, I think it had to do with rampant mutual self-interest by two politicians who were not interested in making peace. As for Condoleezza Rice, I like Condoleezza Rice. I think I don't have an opinion on whether she would be the best, but I can say that I think there have been a lot of women in the United States in the political arena who could have served very admirably as president. And I think your mother was in many ways like me. Neither of us was a legacy politician. Neither of us, many people, particularly in the press, were prepared to underestimate us. Your mother defied things. She did better than I did, but in my case, my predecessor decided not to run again because we had two new parties that both were nibbling away at our vote, and he knew we couldn't win. So he decided not to run again. I don't blame him for that. He had won 2 majorities and he didn't want to go down in a defeat. But I think what both your mother and I were able to demonstrate is that sometimes you can be selected leader based on your own qualities and capabilities. And in the summer of 1993, Gallup said I had the highest approval rating for a prime minister in 30 years. But I was not able to overcome the division of our vote and the fact that my predecessor was the most unpopular prime minister in the history of Canadian polling. So, and your mother encountered some very interesting circumstances, some that worked well for her in increasing her political credibility, and others that presented great challenges. But I think that what Margaret Thatcher showed was the extraordinary ability of somebody who didn't come from what wasn't one of the usual suspects. She went to Oxford. She didn't come from the background where people were prepared to roll out the red carpet. She had to go and get it and push it out herself, and by golly, she did. And that was an extraordinary example of sheer grit and talent manifesting itself at a time when Britain was ready for it. And I think it's quite remarkable.
Thank you.
To say with reference to Condoleezza Rice, it's speculation as to whether she would have made a great president or not. But one of the things that she did, there was consistent polling about could a woman handle rogue terrorists? Okay. And that number, when it was first asked, it was like 40% said that women could handle it. And that was an important part about being president, depending on the environment. But once it started with Condoleezza Rice being Secretary of, what was she?
Secretary of State.
State.
No, sorry, Secretary of, National
Secretary of State.
Advisor.
National Security.
Well, first National Secretary, then
Yeah.
Secretary of State, and then Madeleine Albright becomes Secretary of State, and then Hillary Clinton becomes. That number has gone to almost equality in terms of what people think a woman can do to handle a rogue terrorist, is the phrasing that they put. So she really started breaking through that social, negative framework that women weren't tough enough and things like that. So to that extent, we have to be very grateful for her having done that.
Yes, I saw Madeleine Albright operating in the Security Council, and that it was. Yes. she was certainly somebody, and she came from a background again from her Czech roots that gave her an authority that was again not one of the usual suspects, but somebody demonstrating how to do the job.
And had a great pin jewellery collection.
She did indeed. Have we got any more? There we go.
Thank you. I'm Kodai Noraka from Japan, and I'm studying Master of Public Policy. In Japan, it is very likely to elect new first female prime minister in Japan, who is Ms. Takaichi, who is admirer of Margaret Thatcher. So this is very good timing for me to study in the Somerville College. And my question is, for your personal experience on the international stage, did you experience any positive influence or impact as our image of the nation? So to represent your country as a leader. So did you experience any kind of positive effect on being a leader, as a female leader, to represent the country?
Any advantages to being a woman leader on the international stage?
Well, I think that sometimes novelty is important. When Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister of Great Britain, a lot of the old boys didn't know quite what to make of it. And she just defied their stereotypes and expectations in terms of being strong. But at the same time, being very feminine, she was totally unimpeachable as being a woman. You couldn't say, well, Margaret Thatcher is, they made jokes, she's the only man in the cabinet. They said that about Golda Meir, and they always say about strong women. But, so sometimes the sheer novelty of an unexpected person doing a job can make people sit up and pay attention. It may mean that people will be more critical of your faults, but it may also mean that they're prepared to kind of refresh their view. I thought that Margaret Thatcher it really did it. There was a kind of a reset in Britain about what Britain expected from its leader. Now, she was not uncontroversial, and she, none of us goes into politics and winds up, unscathed by the experience, because the stakes are very high. But I think it's interesting what Japan, now that Japan has a woman prime minister, and and it's interesting because she's also, I think, quite conservative.
Very conservative.
So sometimes, again, people assume that with the people that want to take away the votes from women in the United States because they think they're too liberal. I think that sometimes a woman who plays against stereotype can get even more advantages. But at the end of the day, there are so many other factors. What are the issues of the day? What's the communications environment? It's really very, very hard. But I do think that when you have that kind of change, there are opportunities. And I'll be very interested to see what your new Prime Minister does in Japan. And I hope she has success, because your country is a very important one.
I'd also say that often you see a woman or someone from another historically underrepresented group becoming the leader of the country. It's often because there's a crisis at that moment, right? And people say, well, we've tried kind of the usual, let's try something unique.
Yes,
Let's try something different. Now, does that make it easier for that leader? No, they're always leading during a crisis. So, that's always a problem. But it does allow for the opening of new ideas, as the Prime Minister said. And not only just ideas within the country, because if that country is experiencing crisis, particularly if it's economic, we know that the rest of the globe is probably experiencing some of those same issues. So these new ideas, people are open to them, they're hearing them from a different source, and it's not we tried that before and it didn't work kind of thing. So I think to that extent, there is that opening of opportunity for a woman leader or someone from other historically underrepresented groups.
And can I just say just one thing very quickly? I want to say how important it is that we have now had over the last 20 years some very important 30 years, important women leaders on the international stage, because you were asking about that. Starting with Margaret Thatcher, But I think with Angela Merkel, with Jacinda Ardern, there have been a number of leaders who've made a real impact on the global stage. And I think that dramatically increases the ability of other women to come forward, because these are women who've been seen to act, whether you agree with them or not. I mean, Angela Merkel's, lots of people critical of her, people were critical of Mrs. Thatcher, they're critical of Jacinda Ardern, but they open up the sense that women belong there, that there is nothing unnatural about having a woman in that position. And then you go back to the next mode, which is the right one. How do I evaluate this woman as a person, as what she's doing, not sitting back and imposing preconceptions that I have about, you know, the inevitability that she won't be very good because she's a woman. So I think that in the international arena, the presence of women, and Ursula von der Leyen, all these people that have been mentioned, has opened up possibilities and increased the credibility of women within their own countries because of that recognition.
Thank you. I'm going to offer one last question. Yes, the hand went up there.
Hello, I'm Poppy and I'm currently in my final year of doing my undergrad degree. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Good reaction.
It's been really insightful hearing all your thoughts. I've kind of got two questions really. The first one is, they're both very short, nice one. The first one's kind of a question of terminology.
Sorry, I think we're struggling a little bit to hear you. Can you? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so the first one is kind of more of a question of terminology. Maybe it's more of a generational thing, but when you kind of say women president or women prime minister, my mind kind of more would go to saying female president or female prime minister, and I was wondering if there was maybe a conscious choice when you were setting up the organisation for using the noun as opposed to the adjective, and I don't know if there's maybe, like, what you're saying is more correct. I know, it's just kind of an interesting divide, I thought. And the second one, kind of off the back of the previous question, was you were saying there's kind of a trend of women who are conservative becoming these kind of leaders. And I was wondering if, like, yes, there's kind of more of an acceptability of women in these roles nowadays, but is there more of an acceptability of they're pushing the bounds in one sense, that they're a woman, but they're not pushing the bounds in the sense that they're conservative, and that they are, that maybe a male conservative audience or conservative audience in general, who is more comfortable with these male leaders, can kind of accept that they are women because they are holding these values that they themselves accept. If that makes any sense, but thank you.
Didn't quite get the first question.
The first question is, why did you call it Women's Council rather than Female Council, women leaders rather than female leaders? Is there a difference? Does it matter?
Clearly it didn't when I did it.
Women has more of a sense of personhood to it.
Yeah, I think that's right. Women in you know, female male is a very, I mean, that's kind of biological to a certain extent.
Yeah.
There's fluidity, obviously, but women is a gendered notion also, and so capturing women was more of a sense of. I mean, I really hadn't thought about it in terms of why we didn't choose that, but I think that women to me feels more expansive in terms of understanding the policies. I don't know, Kim, did we ever even talk about that? I don't think we did. It's a good question. Thank you for raising it. Well, now we have to go back and think about it.
It's a reflection of the times as well.
It is a reflection
of the
times.
times.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the women leaders more acceptable when they're conservative, because, well, I don't know whether you mean conservative with a small c or a big C or
Either or, just
Either or.
in one sense, maybe not in the other. Yeah.
What do you think? Would you like the microphone?
Well, if there is a stereotype that women are too soft, then a woman leading on the left, maybe people might see her as not being strong, although there have been very strong women leaders on the left. And it may be that it's part of that counter stereotypical thing that I mean, I was the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, but I did a lot of liberal things in my role as a politician. But I think you put your finger on something that there is an extent to which we all have kind of stereotypes. The stereotypes about men work in their favor when it comes to being leaders. That people think, they want the leaders to sort of be tall and talk like this, and we're sort of programmed to think that means a leader, even if it's a complete idiot. So, you know, perhaps by a woman being not ideologically seen as being kind of soft or overly nurturing or whatever you might think about it, gives people the sense that her femininity is not going to get in the way. Although it's a terrible thing to have to think about people, because you could be many things.
Okay. And I think that's, you know, this whole issue, for example, of crime, you know, you've got to have a certain kind of position on that for people to feel comfortable with the security and the safety and everything. And so for women, it is much more complex, because they have to have all sorts of qualities. Because if you're too demanding, people go, oh, she has no compassion. But if she shows too much, oh, well, she's clearly not going to be very good on crime. So you see the double mind that starts to happen with that kind of thing. I love statistics, so there's a great statistic about the tall part. Kim knows this one. It comes from Blink, Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. He talks about the fact that in the United States, 16% of men in the United States are 6 feet or taller, with 184 centimeters, approximately, 6 feet or taller. So that's the cohort, 16%, right? Then they measure the height of Fortune 500 male CEOs. 57% of Fortune 500 male CEOs are 6 feet or taller, 4 times the cohort, right? And I tell you, I've done a lot of research and interviewed a lot of people. I've yet to see any research that correlates leadership ability and skeletal structure. And yet we have an archetype, right? So
no, it's a good point. So we should be advocating for short men as well as for women.
Absolutely,
absolutely. To be absolutely fair, I think that's been absolutely fascinating, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And hearing your experiences, the two of you, and there's a great team here clearly, and teamwork is part of this. And I think the college is very going to really benefit from having this archive and have this opportunity for all of, not just here in the college, but in the university and more widely, for researchers to come and benefit from the work you've done. But I think I have somebody else who wanted to say final words. Is that right? That's
Zoya.
what.
Thatcher scholar, Zoya.
Zoya. Where's Zoya? There we go. Whoa.
Oh, right. That was impressive.
Yes.
Treats.
I couldn't possibly have done it.
These are just a little something from us to say thank you so much to all three of you for being here today, Laura, Kim and Catherine. I think being here, especially 100 years since Margaret Thatcher was born, a lot's changed, and we have you three to thank for some of those changes. But you've all candidly shared today how there's much more that we need to do. And I think it's the first kind of week of the academic term, and it provides us with a great opportunity for the Somerville community to focus on our efforts on what we can do to kind of change for the better and come as a community together. And I love what you said about snowflakes, and I think Somerville's a great place for that, because globally we bring so many people and individuals together. And some of these changes require us to come together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.